Yeah, still wanna die. I've been thinking a lot about crisis services, specifically suicide hotlines, things like that, but really suicide hotlines to be honest. Just like, I was hoping I might be able to keep monetization. As many of you know, I'm poor and living with chronic mental illness, so I often get recommended these services as an aid for my issue. I'm also aware that recommending these services is something many well-meaning people do all the time without realizing the reality of what these services provide. Given that only about 1/2 of Canadians experiencing a major depressive episode receive potentially adequate care, 1/3 of Canadians aged 15 or older who report having a mental health care need in the past year state that their needs were not fully met, and an estimated 75% of children with mental disorders do not access specialized treatment services, it's no surprise people would insist on a readily available and free service if a loved one was experiencing an episode of crisis. Here's the problem. They don't fucking work. And not only do they not work, but the people who create them never present any evidence that they do any good, and yet the increasingly alienated and mentally ill working class is constantly manipulated and often even threatened into relying on these liberal capitalist and state institutions, despite, at least in my somewhat limited experience, broad consensus being that, unless you're a wealthy suburbanite with almost no real problems besides random and temporary chemical imbalances, they will not only do nothing to help you, but may actually make things worse just from sheer disappointment at the inanity of their responses. Again and again, we see anecdotal reports, some of the only evidence we have with regards to the effectiveness of these services, that such services only end up getting used by suburbanite chemical imbalances clogging up the queues for every minuscule anxiety they have, whereas people with problems they might actually need a free public utility to address, that is, the working poor, are terrified of using these services. It is in fact those who need help the least that almost always receive the most help. Now, I don't really want to be in the position of quoting people on Reddit, but again, there's not much eyewitness testimony on the subject to begin with, so quoting for Elisa on Reddit, the only type of people suicide hotlines work for are the type who would be happy speaking to a wall for an hour. Or perhaps they're a robot trained to periodically say phrases like, "It sounds like you're going through a tough time," between every pause. Because that's all these hotlines really are. Anyone looking for any type of actual human connection will be sorely disappointed, which is not how you want someone who's already on the brink to feel. A lot of people say they've been helped by suicide hotlines, but that's usually because they didn't need help as much as they needed to air out some of their sorrows. And that's fine, if that's what the service is for, excellent. But for the love of God, stop promoting these hotlines as the go-to for suicidal people to find the hope to go on. Most of these hotlines, like almost every state-promoted institution, especially in Canada where I live, purport to be for the benefit of the people, despite any cursory and objective look behind the curtain showing them to be the exact opposite, a weapon of psychological warfare against the people on behalf of the wealthy. Such warfare is conducted through the Catch-22 in question, weaponization of suicidal people's fear of the police. For those of you who don't know, a Catch-22 is, according to Merriam-Webster, a problem for which the only solution is denied by a circumstance inherent in the problem or by a rule. In the case of suicide hotlines, the Catch-22 develops as such. I, as a suicidal person, want to stop being suicidal, but I'm too poor to afford proper medical treatment. Culturally being encouraged to reach out, I am again and again directed to such services as a solution for my problem. However, my problem is so serious that according to the law, which exists as it does not to benefit suicidal people, but to ease the guilty consciences of the people perpetuating this system, the people giving their far beyond mediocre help must stop doing that and call the police, very well known by most of the poor and mentally ill community not as helpers and allies, but as torturers and executioners. The reason this clause exists is to save the insane suicidal people who can't reason for themselves and certainly don't have any real reason to want to die. Excuse me. Mom, did my Chanel come in the mail today? But evidence of course shows it only puts suicidal people in a position where they can only die quietly, isolated from any and all help with only a "I'm sorry you're going through such a tough time. Mom, the Chanel!" to comfort you. The obligatory dangerousness criterion for involuntary commitment in most first world countries is in reality a literal physical threat against a specific group of severely disabled people the capitalist class believes should just shut up and die already. Thus, the Catch-22 manifests itself as an inability to ever attain a stable mental state wherein suicide is not a constant consideration perpetuated by the illusory appearance of relevant resources, heavily propagandized as not being as useless as they are, in addition to state-sponsored tactics of fear and intimidation purging any undesirables or so-called burdensome people from the set of frequent users of such resources. Now this Catch-22 may, when I put it in such clear terms, bring to mind similar patterns in other state programs. Watchers with disabilities almost certainly have an inkling as to the nature of this genocidal strategy, because this process of defining people out of life-saving care occurs most notably in the context of healthcare in general, disability benefits, and various other areas of Canadian society. Yet still in veritable Canadian fashion, the need to gaslight and protect their image remains ever present. One of the first clauses in Crisis Service Canada's public fact sheet reads as follows: CSPS does not replace but complements existing local services to ensure that all people in Canada have immediate and equitable access to free and confidential support on the device of their choice, available 24 hours per day, 7 days a week, 365 days per year. Many services like this use such disclaimers as a way to deflect away criticism of the actual service while slyly obscuring the aid deliberately not given to the most vulnerable elements of society, such that only the most ardent worshippers of capitalism may achieve social mobility, helping continue the perpetual economically rightward shift of capitalist culture since the global spread of neoliberalism in the 80s and 90s, the aim of which was explicitly to achieve an end of history and solidify capitalism forever. Of course this aim was delusional, but whatever. If you want to know why the capitalist state so consistently now and throughout history has destroyed opportunities for the generation of black wealth, or why the controls on immigration in every first world country are so tight and geared towards wealth and personal ideological coherence to capitalist ideals, or why feeding the homeless is so often a crime in corrupt cities, or why we have to pay for the basic necessities of life, it's because capitalists don't want social mobility. People who've seen the failures of society may do something about those failures given power, even if it hurts the capitalist's bottom line. In Canada especially, the Catch-22 of these free and heavily marketed services is often only a continuation of the genocidal project of eugenics that not only fills every corner of its shrouded past, but every corner of its shrouded present. Indigenous children die by suicide about 5 or 6 times more often than non-Indigenous children, and suicide rates for Inuit youth are among the highest in the world, 11 times the already enormous national average. Many know about the recent news about the historical genocide of Indigenous children at Canadian residential schools, or the struggles the Wet'suwet'en people have had against the continuous colonial practices of the Canadian government, or even how that was the result of the inherently genocidal Canadian settler colonialist ideology that is dominant both in Canadian politics and society in general. But yet there is a perpetual surprise whenever a new revelation of Canada's history with eugenics is allowed to come to the forefront. Why? Like, come on, man. This is just the tip of the iceberg. I feel awkward quoting Vosh of all people in one of my essays, but he is right about one thing: they want you dead. The existence of the slave is simultaneously the foundation and undoing of the master. Slavery doesn't continue forever. Everything comes to an end. Thanks so much to Andrew Tapp, Maria Pearson, Michael Gallagher, Pamphleteer, Technica, Oreed, Darth Sitrax, Garrett Polk, Jigglypuffer, Jacqueline Rudick, Krampus, Questing Refuge, and The Silver Samaritan for sponsoring today's video. If you'd like to have your name read at the end of these videos, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/satenmadpun. You can also make a one-time donation at paypal.me/satenmadpun. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Again, I'm going to be streaming me finishing up the rest of my last instrumental for my EP, so if you're interested in that, maybe consider checking it out. It's probably gonna be a fun time. So yeah, other than that, just, I don't know, maybe follow me on Twitter. I'm base as fuck. I have forgotten one thing. I'm very fucking poor, hence like this video, and I'm constantly facing food and housing insecurity, including right now. I don't have the money to be able to pay rent or buy food, so if you could please consider donating, just like keeping that in mind. I'd really appreciate it, because like I'm just like kind of like really stressed all the time right now. So yeah, but other than that, thanks so much for watching again, and I'll see you guys around. Bye.